A bodhisattva who has newly set out in the vehicle considers the accumulations of merit of those Buddhas and lords whose tracks are cut off, whose course is cut off, whose obstacles are cut off, who are guides through the world of becoming, whose tears have dried up, whose impediments are all crushed, whose own burdens are laid down, whose own wheel has been reached, in whom the fetters of becoming are extinguished, whose thoughts are well freed by right understanding, and who have attained to the highest perfection in the control of their entire hearts, as well as the accumulations of merit of the Tathagatas who abide in countless world systems in all the 10 directions and demonstrate dharma together with their congregations of disciples, and also the accumulations of merit of those who have planted wholesome roots under them, or in the good families of warriors, or among the various kinds of gods. All these he piles up, rolls into one lump, and weighs up, and then rejoices over them with the most excellent and sublime jubilation, the highest and utmost jubilation, which has none above it. And, having rejoiced at it, he should turn over into the supreme enlightenment, that wholesome root associated with rejoicing, the turning over marked by the absence of perverted views. Maitreya. If then, subhuti, a bodhisattva who has newly set out in the vehicle has brought to mind all the wholesome roots of those Buddhas and lords, together with their congregations of disciples, and if, after having rejoiced over them with the best too, with the utmost jubilation, he turns them over into the supreme enlightenment, how is it that the bodhisattva does not have a perverted perception, perverted thought, or a perverted view? Subhuti. If Maitreya, the bodhisattva, brings to mind those Buddhas and lords together with their congregations of disciples, then he is not one who perceives a Buddha or a disciple, or a wholesome root. But with regard to the thought by which he turns over, he becomes in that very thought one who perceives the thought only. When he turns over in this way, the bodhisattva has no perverted perception, thought, or view. But if the bodhisattva, having brought to mind those Buddhas and lords and those wholesome roots, makes them into a sign, and, having made them into a sign, turns them over into the supreme enlightenment, then this turning over amounts to a perverted perception, thought, and view. If again a bodhisattva wisely knows those Buddhas and lords, and those wholesome roots, and the thought by which he brings them to mind is just extinct, and if he reflects that what is extinct that cannot be turned over, and that this extinction is the very dharmic nature of the thought by which he turns over, as well as of that which he turns over and of that into which he turns over. If he turns over in this way, then he turns over evenly and not unevenly, not wrongly. It is thus that a bodhisattva should turn over. The bodhisattva considers the accumulation of merit of the past, future, and present Buddhas and lords, from their first production of the thought of enlightenment up to their parinirvana and further up to the vanishing of the good dharma, as well as the accumulation of merit of the disciples and pratyekabuddhas, and also the wholesome roots which as a result of hearing the demonstration of dharma have been planted by the common people, by the devas, nagas, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kinnaras and mahoragas, by members of good warrior families too, by the gods up to the gods of the pure abode. All that he piles up, rolls into one lump, and weighs up, and then, having rejoiced over it with the most excellent and sublime jubilation, which has none above it, is unequalled, and equals the unequalled, he turns all this over into the supreme enlightenment. And if he again turns over while being aware that those dharmas are extinct, stopped, departed, reversed, and that dharma also into which the wholesome root is turned over is empty in its own being, then the wholesome root becomes something which has been turned over into full enlightenment. And so it does if he turns over while aware that dharmas cannot turn over dharmas, because all dharmas are empty in their own being. It is thus that a bodhisattva who courses in the perfection of wisdom in the other perfections is without perverted perception, thought, or view. And why? Because he does not settle down in those turnings over, and, since he does not review those wholesome roots in that thought of enlightenment, he cannot settle down in it. This is the supreme turning over of a bodhisattva, a great being. The isolatedness of the factors involved in turning over The accumulation of the foundations of meritorious work furthermore becomes something which the bodhisattva has turned over into full enlightenment if he remains aware that this accumulation of the foundations of meritorious work is isolated from the skandhas, elements, and sense fields, from the 37 dharmas which act as wings to enlightenment, from the 18 special dharmas of a Buddha. And if furthermore he remains aware that the foundation of meritorious work associated with rejoicing is isolated in its own being, that the Buddhas and Lords are isolated from the own being of a Buddha, that also the wholesome roots are isolated from the own being of wholesome roots, the accumulation from the own being of the accumulations, the thought of enlightenment from the own being of the thought of enlightenment, the thought of turning over from the own being of turning over, enlightenment from the own being of enlightenment, the perfection of wisdom from the own being of the perfection of wisdom, The Buddha dharmas are isolated from the own being of the Buddha dharmas. It is thus that a bodhisattva should course in the isolated perfection of wisdom. This is the perfection of wisdom of a bodhisattva, a great being. Mindful recollection of the own being of the wholesome roots of the Buddhas. Moreover, a bodhisattva should mindfully recollect all the wholesome roots of those Buddhas and Lords and turn them over in such a way that he is aware that such is the turning over, so is the thought by which one turns over. Both are of the same kind, have the same own being. When he remains aware of that, the wholesome root becomes something that has been turned over into full enlightenment. When he turns over in this way, he is without perverted perception, thought, or view. If, however, the bodhisattva who courses in perfection wisdom becomes aware of that wholesome root of those Buddhas and Lords by way of a sign, then he does not succeed in turning it over into full enlightenment. And even if he brings to mind that the Buddhas and Lords of the past who have entered parinirvana are without a sign and without an objective sphere, and if he treats that as a sign, then he does not succeed in turning over those wholesome roots into full enlightenment, and he has perverted perception, perverted thought, and perverted views. But if he does not perceive the Buddhas and Lords, nor those wholesome roots, nor those accumulations, nor those productions of thought, and if he does not make them into a sign, then the wholesome roots become something that has been turned over into full enlightenment, and the bodhisattva is then without perverted perception, thought, or view. The turning over in its association with skill and means. Maitreya. How reverent, subhuti, does the bodhisattva turn over without making a sign? Subhuti. The bodhisattva should train himself in the skill and means contained in this perfection of wisdom. For the bodhisattva should know about skill and means from this perfection of wisdom, and without resorting to the perfection of wisdom he cannot possibly turn over the foundation of meritorious work. Maitreya. One should surely not say then, subhuti, that those Buddhas and Lords do not exist in the perfection of wisdom, nor those wholesome roots, nor those accumulations, nor those production of thought too. One should not say that one does not turn over into full enlightenment. Subhuti. A bodhisattva who courses in perfect wisdom should consider as follows. Stopped are those personal lives, those wholesome roots, those accumulations, and those production of thought. But it is only when one has made a sign that the Buddhas and Lords are discriminated, as well as those wholesome roots, those accumulations, and those productions of thought. And the Tathagatas withhold their sanction from the rejoicing of someone who in this way turns over by way of a sign. And why? For this becomes to him a great basis that he makes into a sign the Buddhas and Lords who have entered parinirvana, that he discriminates and apprehends them. Therefore a bodhisattva who wants to turn over the wholesome roots should not turn them over after having apprehended them and made them into a sign. For the Tathagatas have not ascribed great wonder-working power to the turning over carried out by one who perceives a basis of a sign. And why? Because that turning over is poisonous and thorny. The turning over is signless. It is just as with food that seems excellent but has been mixed with a poison which is concealed under its apparently desirable color and taste. Some foolish person might think that it should be eaten. When he eats it, it appears good in its color and taste, but its transformation in someone who eats it leads to a painful conclusion. Just so someone who has badly seized the teaching, badly distinguished it, and who badly repeats it, and who neither knows its meaning nor understands it, will instruct others as follows. Come here, you son of good family, and consider the wholesome roots which the Buddhas and lords of the past, future, and present have effected in the interval between their first production of the thought of enlightenment, up to their achievement of the supreme enlightenment, up to their entry into final nirvana in the nirvana element which leaves nothing behind, and up to the vanishing of the good dharma, by coursing in the perfection of wisdom and in the other perfections, and also the wholesome roots associated with the four trances, too. The 18 Buddha dharmas, through the accumulation of which the Buddha fields are purified and beings matured, and of those Buddhas and lords the massive morality, concentration, wisdom, emancipation, and the mass of the vision and cognition of emancipation, as well as their cognition of the knowledge of all modes, the cognition of the state of being always mindful, the dwelling always in even-mindedness, and also the wholesome roots effected by the disciples and by the predestined to pratyekabuddhahood, and also the wholesome roots effected by gods, nagas, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kinnaras, and mahoragas. And then, having piled all these up, rolled them into one lump, and weighed them up, turned them over into the supreme enlightenment. Thus this turning over, since it is carried out by means of a sign and a basis, causes people to partake of poisonousness. It is just like the poisonous food mentioned before. There can be no turning over for one who perceives a basis. And why? For a basis poisonous has arranged and is connected with signs, causes, and conditions. One who turns over in this way has not been well taught by the Tathagata. He does not preach what the Tathagata has said. He does not preach the Dharma. Followers of the bodhisattva vehicle should not train in this way. The turning over as enjoined by the Buddhas. Maitreya. How, then, should one turn over the wholesome roots of the past, future, and present Buddhas and lords, after having rejoiced over them, from the production of their first thought of enlightenment, to their awakening to the supreme enlightenment, to the period when their good dharma remains established, including their congregations of disciples, all the wholesome roots which they have effected during this interval, until they have attained all knowledge too? How should one, after having rejoiced over them, turn over the wholesome roots planted by gods, nagas, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, mahoragas, humans and non-humans? And how should one turn over so that those wholesome roots are actually turned over into the supreme enlightenment? Subhuti. Here a follower of the great vehicle, who courses in the perfection of wisdom and who does not want to calumniate the Tathagata, should turn over as follows. As the Tathagatas cognize with their unsurpassed Buddha cognition those wholesome roots, their kind such as it is, their own being such as it is, their marks such as they are, and as they exist in their own dharmic nature, just so I rejoice, and as the Buddhas and lords cognize it, so also I turn over into the supreme enlightenment. It is thus that a follower of the great vehicle should turn those wholesome roots over into the supreme enlightenment. When he turns over in such a way, he does not calumniate the Tathagatas, he preaches what the Tathagata has said and he preaches Dharma. It is thus that the bodhisattva's turning over becomes non-poisonous. The turning over is unincluded in what belongs to the triple world. Furthermore, someone who has set out in the great vehicle and who courses in the perfection of wisdom should turn over those wholesome roots while he realizes that form is unincluded in the world of sense desire, the world of form and the formless world, and so are feelings too. Conditioned co-production. And so also the perfection of wisdom and the other perfections, and so suchness, dharmahood, the element of dharma, the reality limit and the unthinkable element, and so are a Tathagata's morality, concentration, wisdom, emancipation, vision and cognition of emancipation, his knowledge of all modes, his state of beings always mindful, and his always dwelling in even-mindedness. But that is unincluded in the triple world, so is also the turning over, and the dharmas which and into which one turns over, and he who turns